You want it half? Take the smoke.
The notification sound from Sienna's phone pierced the 3 a.m. silence like a knife through my skull. I'd been lying awake for hours, staring at the ceiling of our overpriced suburban bedroom, listening to her breathe that fake sleep rhythm she'd perfected over the past 6 months. You know the one. Too steady, too practiced. The breathing of someone who's pretending to be unconscious while their mind races with guilty thoughts. My name is Evan Callahan, and until 3 hours ago, I thought I was living the American dream. Self-made tech CEO, beautiful wife, house in the hills overlooking the city. The kind of success story they write about in business magazines. The kind of life that makes your old high school classmates hate scroll through your social media posts while eating microwave dinners in their studio apartments. But dreams have a funny way of turning into nightmares when you're not paying attention. Sienna's phone buzzed again. Then again. At 3 in the morning, decent people don't get text messages unless someone's dead or dying. My wife, apparently, wasn't dealing with either tragedy. She was dealing with something much more interesting than her husband's insomnia. I rolled over, pretending to shift in my sleep, and watched her through half-closed eyes. She was awake, all right. Her breathing had changed, become shallow and quick. Her hands snaked out from under the covers, fingers searching for her phone on the nightstand. The screen's blue glow illuminated her face as she read whatever message had arrived. Even in the darkness, I could see her smile. It wasn't the smile she gave me anymore. This was something else entirely. Something hungry and secretive, and absolutely devastating to witness from 3 feet away. She typed back quickly, her fingers dancing across the screen with practiced efficiency. Then, she deleted the conversation thread, cleared her recent calls, and placed the phone face down on the nightstand. The whole performance took maybe 30 seconds. She'd done this before, many times. When she settled back into bed, I could smell it on her. Gin and tonic, expensive cologne that wasn't mine, and something else. Something that made my stomach twist with a combination of rage and humiliation that I'd never experienced before. The next morning, Sienna bounced into our kitchen like a woman who'd won the lottery. She was wearing my favorite dress, the red one that hugged her curves in all the right places, and humming some song I didn't recognize. Her dark hair was perfect, her makeup flawless. She looked like she was preparing for something important. "Good morning, honey," she said, not looking up from her phone. "I've got that conference in Chicago today, remember? I told you about it last week." I remembered no such conversation, but I nodded anyway, sipping my coffee and watching her perform this elaborate charade. She was good at it, I had to give her that. If I hadn't seen her midnight phone session, I might have believed her. "How long will you be gone?" I asked. "Just 2 days, maybe 3 if the meetings run long." She finally looked at me, and for a split second, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Guilt? Fear? Or maybe just annoyance that she had to maintain this pretense. "I'll miss you," I said, testing her reaction. "Miss you too, baby." The words came out automatically, like she was reading from a script she'd memorized but no longer believed in. After she left, I sat in our kitchen for a long time, staring at the spot where she'd been standing. 10 years of marriage. 10 years of building something together. Or so I thought. The company, the house, the life we'd created. Apparently, Sienna had decided she wanted to renegotiate the terms of our partnership. I'm not a violent man. Never have been. But sitting there in the silence of our empty house, I felt something dark and calculating settle into my chest. If my wife wanted to play games, I was going to make sure I understood the rules. The first thing I did was call Grant Morrison, my chief operating officer, and the closest thing I had to a best friend. Grant had been with me since the early days of Callahan Technologies, back when we were working out of a garage and living on ramen noodles and caffeine. He knew me better than anyone, including my wife. "Evan?" Grant's voice was concerned. "You sound like heck. What's wrong?" "I need you to do something for me," I said, "and I need you to not ask questions until I'm ready to give answers." "Okay. What do you need?" "Check our cloud backup system. See if Sienna's phone is still syncing to the family account." "Evan, what's going on?" "Just check, Grant. Please. 10 minutes later, he called back. Yeah, her phone's been backing up automatically. Photos, messages, everything. She probably doesn't even realize it's happening. Most people forget about the automatic sync settings. Can you access it? Technically, yes. It's your account. But Evan, if you're thinking what I think you're thinking, send me everything from the last 6 months. Another pause. Are you sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The files arrived in my inbox 20 minutes later. Photos, text messages, call logs, location data. A complete digital record of my wife's secret life. I opened the first folder with hands that were surprisingly steady. What I found there changed everything. The photos were the worst part. Not because they were explicit, though some of them were, but because of how happy she looked. Sienna, my wife of 10 years, laughing and smiling and glowing with a joy I hadn't seen her express in our own home for months. She was with a man I recognized, Damian Cross, her boss at the marketing firm where she worked as an HR executive. Damian Cross. Mid-40s, silver hair, expensive suits, and the kind of arrogant smile that made you want to punch him on principle. I'd met him at company parties, shaken his hand, made small talk about quarterly projections and market trends. He'd looked me in the eye and complimented my wife's work performance, while apparently planning to destroy my marriage. But the photos were just the beginning. The text messages told the real story. Damien, can't wait to see you in Chicago. Booked the penthouse suite at the Meridian. Unmistake, Sienna. What if someone sees us? Selfies. Let them look. You deserve better than what you have. Semantics, MX. Sienna. Evan's been so distant lately. I don't think he even notices when I'm gone. MX. Damien. His loss. When are you going to tell him? RO. A Sienna. Soon. After I figure out the financials. Half of everything is mine, right? The house, the company, all of it. MSM. Safeguards. More than half if you play it right. I know lawyers who specialize in these situations. RAIM. I read that exchange 3 times before the full impact hit me. This wasn't just an affair. This was a calculated plan to destroy me financially and emotionally. Sienna wasn't just cheating on me. She was positioning herself to take everything I'd worked for. The location data confirmed what the messages suggested. Chicago, yes, but also hotels in our own city, restaurants I'd never been to, apartment buildings in the expensive part of town. My wife had been living an entire secret life, funded by the joint credit cards that were connected to my business accounts. I scrolled through months of evidence, each message and photo adding another layer to my humiliation. But somewhere around hour 3 of this digital archaeology expedition, something interesting happened. The humiliation began to transform into something else, something colder and more focused. Sienna thought she was smart. Damien thought he was untouchable. They both thought I was the kind of man who would just roll over and accept whatever scraps they decided to leave me. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The beautiful thing about being a tech CEO is that you understand systems, networks, processes, cause and effect. You learn to think several moves ahead, to anticipate problems before they become crises. Most importantly, you learn that information is the most valuable currency in the modern world. By the time Sienna returned from her fake Chicago conference, I had assembled a complete dossier on her affair. Bank records showing expensive dinners and hotel stays, credit card receipts from lingerie stores and jewelry shops, purchases that had never made their way home to me. Even GPS tracking data that placed her car at Damien's apartment building on at least 15 different occasions over the past 4 months. But I didn't confront her immediately. That would have been emotional, sloppy, the kind of mistake that gives your opponent the advantage. Instead, I watched and waited and prepared for war. Sienna came home on Thursday evening with a suitcase full of dirty laundry and a head full of lies. She kissed me on the cheek, a dry, perfunctory peck that felt like a business transaction, and immediately launched into an elaborate story about client presentations and team-building exercises and how exhausting it had been to be away from home. "How was Chicago?" I asked, settling into my favorite chair with a glass of whiskey. "Cold and boring," she said without missing a beat. "You know how these corporate things are. Death by PowerPoint. Just have been rough. You look tired." She did look tired, actually. But it was the kind of exhaustion that comes from maintaining multiple lies simultaneously, not from sitting through business meetings. "I'm going to take a long bath," she said. "Maybe we can order takeout later? I'm too wiped out to cook." "Sure," I said. "Whatever you want." As soon as I heard the bathroom door close, I made my first move. I'd already prepared everything in advance. New passwords for all our joint accounts, legal documents establishing my sole ownership of Callahan Technologies, and a comprehensive security system for our house that included cameras in every room except the bathrooms and bedrooms. The account changes took effect immediately. Credit cards, checking accounts, savings accounts, everything that had Sienna's name on it was now locked down tight. She'd discover the changes soon enough, but by then, it would be too late for her to do any financial damage. The legal documents were more complex, but equally important. Sienna had never been officially involved with my company, despite what she apparently believed about her rights to half of everything. Callahan Technologies was a privately held corporation that I'd established before our marriage, using my own capital and credit. She had no legal claim to any part of it, but I wanted to make absolutely certain there were no loopholes she could exploit. My lawyer, Patricia Hendricks, had worked with me since the company's early days. She was smart, ruthless, and had seen enough messy divorces to know exactly what we were dealing with. "This is pretty comprehensive," Patricia said when I showed her the evidence I'd compiled. "Text messages, photos, financial records. She's been sloppy. What are my options? Legally, you're in excellent shape. The company is yours, the house is in your name only, and you've got ironclad documentation of her infidelity. If she tries to claim spousal support, this evidence will destroy any sympathy a judge might have had for her." "And what about him, Damian Cross?" Partition smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "That's where things get interesting. He's her supervisor, which creates a hostile work environment situation. His company could face serious liability issues if this becomes public. Plus, if he's been using company resources to facilitate this affair, company credit cards, business trips, that sort of thing, he could be looking at embezzlement charges." I said, "Completely and publicly. That can be arranged. But Evan, once we start down this path, there's no going back. Are you absolutely sure this is what you want?" I thought about Sienna in our bathroom, probably texting Damien about how boring her husband was and how excited she was about their future together. I thought about 10 years of marriage that had apparently meant nothing to her. I thought about the company I'd built from nothing, the life I'd created, the trust I'd given to someone who was planning to use it against me. "I'm sure," I said. The first phase of my plan activated that weekend. Sienna tried to use our joint credit card for a shopping trip with her friend Lila, and the transaction was declined. Then she tried another card. Declined. Then she tried to access our checking account online and discovered her login credentials no longer worked. I was in my home office when she stormed in, her face flushed with anger and confusion. "What the heck is going on with our accounts?" she demanded. I looked up from my laptop with what I hoped was a convincing expression of surprise. "What do you mean?" "I mean, none of our credit cards are working, and I can't access our bank accounts. Did something happen while I was gone?" "That's weird," I said. "Let me check." I made a show of logging into our accounts, frowning at the screen as if I was seeing the security changes for the first time. Looks like there might have been some suspicious activity detected. The bank probably froze everything as a precaution. I'll call them first thing Monday morning." It was a thin lie, but Sienna was too panicked to examine it closely. She needed access to money, and she needed it now. Her affair with Damien had been expensive, and she'd been counting on my credit cards to fund her lifestyle. "Can't you call them now?" she asked. "It's Saturday, Sienna. The fraud department isn't open on weekends." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was trying to figure out if this was a coincidence or if I somehow knew about her activities. But I kept my expression neutral. concerned but not suspicious. "Fine," she said finally, "but call them first thing Monday. I have things I need to take care of." Of course. What kind of things? The question caught her off guard. Just things, personal stuff. Like what? "Why are you interrogating me, Evan? I said it was personal." "I'm not interrogating you. I'm just curious about what's so urgent that it can't wait until our accounts are unfrozen." She turned and walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back at me. "You've been acting strange lately. Is there something you want to tell me?" Stimulates was almost too perfect. "No," I said. "Is there something you want to tell me?" For a split second, I thought she might confess everything. Her mouth opened slightly, and I could see her weighing her options. But then, the moment passed, and she shook her head. "No," she said. "Nothing at all." After she left, I allowed myself a small smile. Phase 1 was complete. Sienna was now financially dependent on me, which meant she couldn't make any major moves without my knowledge. More importantly, she was starting to feel the pressure. Guilty people make mistakes when they're under stress, and I was planning to apply a lot more stress in the coming days. My phone rang. Grant's name appeared on the screen. "How's it going?" he asked. "Better than expected. She's rattled, but not suspicious yet." "And you're sure about all this? Once word gets out, it's going to be messy for everyone." "It's already messy, Grant. I'm just making sure I'm not the one who gets buried in the mess. What's your next move?" I looked out the window of my office, toward the city where Damian Cross was probably planning his next romantic evening with my wife. I'm going to introduce myself to Mr. Cross. Properly this time. Elijah Cross, Damian Cross worked out of a glass tower in the financial district. The kind of building that screamed, "We're important and expensive," to anyone within a 5-mile radius. His marketing firm, Cross & Associates, occupied the entire 32nd floor, with panoramic views of the city and enough marble and mahogany to outfit a small palace. I'd done my research. Damian had built his company through a combination of aggressive networking, questionable ethics, and a willingness to do whatever it took to land big clients. He was married to a woman named Victoria, had 2 teenage daughters, and lived in a mansion that was featured in Architectural Digest 3 years ago. He drove a red Ferrari, belonged to the most exclusive country club in the city, and had a reputation for seducing his female employees. In other words, he was exactly the kind of man who would see my wife as both a conquest and an opportunity. I arrived at his office building on Tuesday morning, dressed in my best suit and carrying a leather portfolio that contained copies of every piece of evidence I'd compiled. The receptionist in the lobby was young and blonde, and smiled at me like I was the most important person she'd see all day. "I'm here to see Damian Cross," I told her. "I don't have an appointment, but I think he'll want to see me." "Sir?" "Evan Callahan. Tell him it's about Sienna." Revenge Satchist made a phone call, spoke in hushed tones for about 30 seconds, then hung up and looked at me with a slightly different expression. More cautious, less friendly. "Mr. Cross will see you now," she said. 32nd floor, corner office." The elevator ride gave me time to center myself. I wasn't here to lose my temper or make threats. I was here to deliver information and gauge my opponent's reaction. Everything else would depend on how Damian chose to play this conversation. His office was exactly what I'd expected. Oversized desk, expensive art, floor-to-ceiling windows that made visitors feel small and intimidated. Damian was standing behind his desk when I walked in, and I could see he was trying to project confidence, but his eyes gave him away. He was nervous. "Evan," he said, extending his hand. "This is unexpected. Please have a seat." I shook his hand in one of the leather chairs across from his desk. "Thanks for seeing me without an appointment. I know how busy you must be." "Not too busy for the husband of one of my best employees. Sienna speaks about you all the time." "I'm sure she does." I opened my portfolio and pulled out a manila folder. "Actually, that's why I'm here. I wanted to talk to you about Sienna's work performance." Damian's smile faltered slightly. "Her work performance?" Yes. See, I've been reviewing our family finances lately, and I noticed some unusual expenses. Hotel bills, restaurant charges, that sort of thing. All charged to our joint credit cards, but none of them places I remember going with my wife. I opened the folder and pulled out the first set of receipts, spreading them across his desk like I was dealing cards. The Meridian Hotel in Chicago. Dinner for two at Le Bernardin. A weekend at the Chateau Marmont. All expensive places, all charged during times when Sienna told me she was working. Damien's face had gone pale, but he was still trying to maintain his composure. I'm not sure what you're implying, Evan. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. I pulled out the next set of documents, printed copies of text messages between him and my wife. These are communications between you and Sienna, discussing your various romantic encounters and your plans to help her divorce me. Hands were shaking as he picked up one of the message transcripts. I watched him read his own words back to himself, watched the reality of his situation sink in. Where did you get these? He asked. Does it matter? The question is, what are we going to do about this situation? Damien set the papers down and looked at me with what he probably thought was a intimidating stare. Look, Evan, I understand you're upset, but whatever problems you and Sienna are having, they're between you and her. I don't appreciate being dragged into your domestic issues. Laughed. Domestic issues? You've been sleeping with my wife for months, using company resources to facilitate your affair, and encouraging her to divorce me so you can get your hands on my assets. That's not a domestic issue, Damien. That's fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. You can't prove any of that. It pulled out another folder, this one much thicker than the first. Credit card records showing you used company accounts to pay for hotel rooms where you met my wife. GPS data from her phone showing she was at your apartment when she told me she was working late. Photos of you two together at restaurants and events. Text messages where you explicitly discuss your plan to help her claim half my company in a divorce settlement. I spread the evidence across his desk until the entire surface was covered. I can prove all of it, Damien. The question is whether I'm going to prove it in a civil court, a criminal court, or just in the court of public opinion. He stared at the documents for a long time, his face cycling through various emotions. Fear, anger, calculation, and finally, resignation. What do you want? He asked. I want you to fire my wife. Today. I want you to end your affair immediately and never contact her again. And I want you to stay the heck away from me and my business. And if I do all that, then maybe this stays between us. Maybe your wife never finds out about your extracurricular activities. Maybe your business partners never learn about your creative use of company funds. This Damien was quiet for a long moment, staring out his window at the city below. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, smaller, defeated. Sienna said you were weak, he said. She said you were so focused on your computers and your business that you wouldn't even notice what was happening right under your nose. Relinquith. She was wrong. Yeah, she was wrong about a lot of things. He looked back at me, and I could see something like respect in his eyes. You know, I almost feel sorry for her. She has no idea what's coming, does she? No, I said. She doesn't. I gathered up the documents and put them back in my portfolio. I'll expect her termination to be effective immediately. And Damien, if you're thinking about warning her or trying to help her prepare for what's coming next, remember that I have copies of everything. Cross me, and I'll destroy you and your company so thoroughly that you'll never work in this city again. He nodded. I understand. Good. It's been a pleasure doing business with you. I lights his office feeling lighter than I had in months. Phase 2 was complete. Sienna was about to lose her job, her lover, and her primary source of emotional support all at the same time. More importantly, she was about to discover that her husband wasn't the weak, oblivious man she thought he was. My phone rang as I was walking back to my car. Sienna's name appeared on the screen. Hello, sweetheart, I said. Evan, something terrible has happened. Damien just fired me. He said it was budget cuts, but I think there's more to it. He seemed really upset about something. That's awful, honey. I'm so sorry. Are you okay? Dismissing. I'm in shock. I don't understand what happened. Everything was fine yesterday, and now she started crying, or at least pretending to cry. Can you come pick me up? I don't think I should drive right now. Of course. I'll be right there. As I drove toward her office building, I allowed myself to enjoy the moment. Sienna thought she was the victim in this situation. She thought her husband was rushing to comfort her in her time of need. She had no idea that her time of need was just beginning. The next few days were a masterclass in watching someone's carefully constructed lies collapse in real time. Sienna came home from her firing in a state of controlled panic, alternating between rage at Damien's betrayal and desperate attempts to figure out what had gone wrong with her plan. She couldn't call him. He'd already blocked her number on his personal phone, and his office assistant had been instructed to screen her calls. She couldn't access their shared email accounts or social media threads because I'd been monitoring those communications and knew she'd try to reach him that way. For the first time in months, Sienna was completely cut off from her co-conspirator. I played the supportive husband perfectly, brought her coffee, listened to her vent about unfair employment practices, even suggested she might want to consult with a lawyer about wrongful termination, all while knowing that any lawyer worth their retainer would take one look at her situation and run for the hills. "I just don't understand it," she said on Thursday evening, pacing around our living room like a caged animal. Everything was going so well, and then suddenly, Damien won't even take my calls. It's like he's a completely different person. "Maybe he's under pressure from his board of directors," I suggested. "You said the company was having financial troubles. But why fire me specifically? I was one of their best performers. Sometimes these corporate decisions don't make sense from the outside. Maybe it really was just budget cuts." She stopped pacing and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You're being very understanding about all this." "Why wouldn't I be? You lost your job. That affects both of us." "I know, but usually when something like this happens, you get all stressed about money and start lecturing me about our expenses." She was right. The old Evan would have been worried about losing her income, would have immediately started calculating how her unemployment would affect our household budget. But the old Evan didn't know that his wife was planning to divorce him and steal half his company. "We'll figure it out," I said. "Maybe this is an opportunity for you to try something new." "Expelled like what?" "I don't know. Start your own consulting firm? Take some time to think about what you really want to do with your career." Suggestions seemed to calm her down. I could see her mind working, probably calculating how a consulting firm might position her for the divorce proceedings she was still planning. "That's actually not a bad idea," she said. "I have a lot of contacts in the industry, and with my experience..." "Exactly. You could probably make more money on your own than you ever did working for someone else." What I didn't tell her was that starting a consulting firm requires capital, and capital requires access to money. Money that she no longer had, thanks to the account freezes that were still mysteriously unresolved, despite my promises to call the bank. Friday morning brought the next phase of my plan. I'd arranged for our mutual friends, couples we'd socialized with for years, to learn about Sienna's affair through carefully orchestrated, accidental discoveries. A photo left open on a tablet during a dinner party. A overheard phone conversation that revealed just enough to spark curiosity. A casual mention of seeing Sienna at a restaurant with a man who definitely wasn't her husband. The first call came from Jennifer Walsh, whose husband Tom worked in the same building as Damien's company. "Evan, I hope you don't mind me calling, but I heard something today that I thought you should know about." "What's going on, Jen?" "Tom saw Sienna coming out of the Meridian Hotel yesterday afternoon. She was with a man he didn't recognize. They were acting like more than friends, if you know what I mean." I let the silence stretch out, as if I was processing this shocking information for the first time. "Are you sure it was Sienna?" "Tom's known her for 8 years, Evan. He's sure." "Maybe it was a business meeting. At a hotel? In the middle of the afternoon?" "Evan, I'm sorry, but I don't think this was business." I thanked Jennifer for calling and hung up, then immediately dialed Grant. "It's working," I told him. "The word is starting to spread." "How are you holding up?" "Better than I expected. There's something liberating about finally knowing the truth." "And Sienna still doesn't suspect anything?" "Not yet, but she's getting paranoid. I think she can sense that something's changed, but she can't figure out what." The weekend brought more calls. More concerned friends, sharing rumors and speculation about my wife's behavior. Each conversation followed the same pattern. shocked disbelief, followed by awkward sympathy, followed by promises to keep me in their thoughts and prayers. By Sunday evening, Sienna's phone had gone unusually quiet. The friends who used to text her constantly about lunch dates and shopping trips had mysteriously stopped reaching out. The social invitations that used to fill our calendar had dried up. She was being slowly but systematically frozen out of our social circle, and she couldn't understand why. "Have you talked to Tom and Jennifer lately?" she asked during dinner. "Not recently. Why?" "I called Jennifer yesterday about getting together for drinks, and she was really weird. Cold almost. Like she didn't want to talk to me. Maybe she was having a bad day." "Maybe, but it's not just her. Lisa hasn't returned my calls all week, and when I ran into Sarah at the grocery store, she practically ran away from me." July made a sympathetic noise. "I'm sure it's nothing personal. People get busy." But Sienna wasn't buying it. She was smart enough to recognize a pattern when she saw one, even if she couldn't identify the cause. "Something's going on," she said. "People don't just suddenly stop talking to you for no reason." "What do you think it could be?" She looked at me across the dinner table, and for a moment, I thought she might confess everything. "Tell me about Damien, about their affair, about her plans to divorce me." But instead, she just shook her head. "I don't know," she said, "but I'm going to find out." After Sienna had gone to bed, I received a text message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Central Park. Come alone." I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. But I knew who had sent it, and I knew what he wanted to discuss. Damien Cross was getting desperate, and desperate men make dangerous decisions. I had a feeling tomorrow's conversation was going to be very interesting indeed. Central Park at 2 p.m. on a Monday was surprisingly crowded. Joggers, dog walkers, tourists with cameras, office workers eating lunch on benches. The perfect cover for a conversation that neither party wanted to be overheard. I found Damien sitting on a bench near the reservoir, looking like a man who hadn't slept in days. He'd lost weight since our meeting at his office. His expensive suit hung loose on his frame, and there were dark circles under his eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. When he saw me approaching, he stood up with the nervous energy of someone who'd been drinking too much coffee and not eating enough food. "Thanks for coming," he said. "You sounded desperate in your text. What's so important that it couldn't wait?" He looked around nervously, as if he expected to see photographers hiding behind the trees. "We have a problem." "We don't have anything, Damien. You have a problem. I have a solution. My wife knows." I felt a surge of satisfaction, but kept my expression neutral. "Knows what?" "About Sienna. About everything. Someone sent her copies of our text messages, photos of us together, hotel receipts. She's filing for divorce and demanding half of everything I own." "That's unfortunate, but I don't see how it's my problem." "You did this." His voice was rising, attracting attention from nearby pedestrians. "You're the one who sent her those materials." "Can you prove that?" He stared at me with a mixture of hatred and grudging respect. "You're destroying my life." "No, Damien. You will set your friend." "No, Damien. You destroyed your own life when you decided to sleep with my wife and plot to steal my company. I'm just making sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are." "What do you want? Money? I'll pay you whatever you want to make this stop." I almost laughed. "You think this is about money? Then what? Revenge? You've already gotten your revenge. My marriage is over, my business is hemorrhaging clients, and my daughters won't even speak to me. What more do you want?" "I want you to disappear. Leave the city, start over somewhere else, and never contact my wife again." "And if I don't?" I pulled out my phone and showed him a video file. It was security footage from the hotel where he and Sienna had spent their weekend getaway, clearly showing them entering a room together. "This goes to the local news stations," I said, "along with documentation of how you used company funds to pay for your affair. Your business partners will love that story." Damien's face went white. "You can't do that. It would destroy innocent people. My employees, my clients." "Should have thought of that before you started sleeping with my wife," We stared at each other for a long moment. Around us, life in the park continued. Children playing, couples walking hand in hand, old men feeding pigeons. Normal people living normal lives, unaware of the drama playing out on this particular bench. "There's something else you should know," Damien said finally. "About Sienna." "What about her?" "She's been planning this longer than you think. The affair, the divorce, all of it. She approached me, not the other way around." I kept my expression neutral, but internally I was fascinated. "What do you mean?" "She researched me before we ever met. Found out about my company's financial situation, my reputation with women, my connections in the legal community. She seduced me as part of a larger plan to position herself for a profitable divorce." "You're lying." "Am I? Ask yourself this. Why would a woman like Sienna, who had everything she wanted, suddenly decide to risk it all for an affair? Unless she was planning to trade up to something better." The suggestion hit me harder than I'd expected. I'd assumed that Sienna's affair was emotional, impulsive, the result of some midlife crisis or momentary weakness. The idea that it had been calculated from the beginning was somehow more devastating than simple infidelity. "She used both of us," Damien continued. "You for your money and me for my connections. She never cared about either of us as people." "Even if that's true, it doesn't change anything." "Doesn't it? You're so focused on destroying me that you're missing the real threat. Sienna is smarter and more dangerous than you realize. Whatever you're planning for her, she's probably already 2 steps ahead of you." I stood up from the bench. "Thanks for the warning, but I think I can handle my own wife." "Can you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like she's been handling you for years." I walked away without responding, but Damien's words followed me. Was it possible that Sienna had been planning this divorce from the beginning? That everything about our marriage had been a performance designed to position her for maximum financial gain? The thought should have made me angrier, but instead, it made me more determined. If Sienna thought she could manipulate and discard me like some kind of business transaction, she was about to learn that I wasn't as easy to handle as she believed. That evening, I implemented the final phase of my plan. I'd been saving the best evidence for last. A recording I'd made of Sienna talking to her friend Lila about her plans for our divorce. She'd been drunk, careless, and brutally honest about her motivations. I called our local television station and spoke to an investigative reporter named Marcus Chen, who specialized in exposing corporate fraud and personal corruption. I'd worked with him before on stories related to tech industry scandals, and I knew he had a talent for turning complex financial crimes into compelling television. "I have a story for you," I told him. "Corporate executive uses company resources to facilitate an extramarital affair, then conspires with his lover to defraud her husband in a divorce settlement. How solid is your evidence?" "Embraces. Bank records, text messages, audio recordings, photographs. Everything you need to prove the story beyond any reasonable doubt." "And you're willing to go on camera?" "Absolutely. This isn't just about me. It's about holding powerful people accountable for their actions." We scheduled the interview for Wednesday afternoon. By Thursday evening, the story would be broadcast to every television in the city. Sienna and Damien's private affair would become very public knowledge, and their reputations would be destroyed beyond any possibility of recovery. But first, I had one more conversation to have with my wife. I found Sienna in our bedroom on Tuesday night, sitting on the edge of the bed with her laptop open and papers scattered around her. She was researching divorce lawyers, though she didn't know I could see her screen from the doorway. "Working late?" I asked. She quickly closed the laptop. "Just paying some bills online." "With what money? Our accounts are still frozen, remember?" For a split second, her mask slipped, and I saw something cold and calculating in her eyes. But then she recovered, putting on the confused and frustrated expression she'd been wearing for the past week. "I've been thinking about that," she said. "Don't you think it's strange that the bank hasn't resolved this issue yet? I mean, it's been over a week. These things take time." "Do they?" "Because I called them myself yesterday, and they said there was no record of any suspicious activity on our accounts. They said the accounts were frozen by the primary account holder. I sat down in the chair across from our bed, maintaining eye contact. That's interesting. What do you think it means? I think it means you froze the accounts yourself. Why would I do that? You tell me, Evan. We stared at each other across the room, and I could feel the pretense finally falling away. This was the moment of truth, the confrontation we'd both been building toward. Maybe I froze the accounts because I discovered that my wife has been using our money to fund an affair with her boss, I said. Sienna's face went through a series of rapid changes. Surprise, fear, anger, and finally resignation. When she spoke again, her voice was different, colder, more businesslike. How long have you known? Long to document everything. The hotels, the restaurants, the text messages, the plans to divorce me and take half my company. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. I suppose you're going to threaten me now. Try to intimidate me into walking away with nothing. I was going to offer you a choice. What kind of choice? You can file for divorce tomorrow morning and accept a settlement of $50,000 and the car. Clean break, no alimony, no claims on the company or the house. She turned around, and I could see her calculating the offer. And if I don't accept? Then tomorrow evening, you'll be watching yourself on the 6 o'clock news, along with everyone else in the city. You're bluffing. I pulled out my phone and showed her the same video I'd shown Damien. Channel 7 is running a story about corporate executives who misuse their positions to facilitate extramarital affairs. You and Damien are going to be the featured case study. Remaining her composure finally cracked. You bastard. You can't do this to me. I can do whatever I want, Sienna. You seem to have forgotten that I built this life we've been living. The house, the money, the social connections, all of it came from me. You were just along for the ride. I was your wife. I supported you. I helped you build your company. You filed papers and answered phones for 6 months, 10 years ago. That doesn't make you a co-founder. She was crying now, but they were tears of rage, not sadness. I gave you the best years of my life. No, you gave me a performance. A very convincing one, but still just a performance. The real Sienna was planning to destroy me from the beginning. That's not true. Damien told me some interesting things about how your affair started, about how you researched him, seduced him, used him to position yourself for a profitable divorce. She opened her mouth to deny it, then seemed to realize there was no point in continuing the charade. So what if I did? You think I was going to spend the rest of my life married to a man who cared more about his computers than his wife? You could have just asked for a divorce. Instead, you chose to lie, cheat, and steal. Fleming, I chose to secure my future, something you would have understood if you'd ever paid attention to anyone but yourself. I stood up and walked toward the door. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. $50,000 in the car, or public humiliation and a legal battle you can't win. Apex. Wait! Her voice stopped me at the doorway. What about Damien? Stabilize. What about him? Are you destroying him too? His wife is divorcing him. His business is failing, and his reputation is ruined. I'd say he's already destroyed. Windshield. She nodded slowly. You're not the man I married. No, I'm not. The man you married was naive enough to trust you. The man standing here now knows exactly who you are and what you're capable of. I left her in the bedroom and walked downstairs to my office. Through the window, I could see the city spreading out below us. Millions of lights representing millions of lives. Most of those people would never know that a small drama had played out in this house tonight, that two people had finally stopped pretending to love each other and acknowledged the calculation that had replaced their marriage. My phone buzzed with a text message from Grant. How did it go? Better than expected. I think she'll take the deal. And if she doesn't, then tomorrow night, everyone in the city will know what kind of woman Sienna Callahan really is. I poured myself a whiskey and sat back in my chair. In a few hours, this would all be over. My marriage would be officially dead, but at least the pretense would finally end. I'd discovered that my wife was a stranger, but I'd also discovered that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. The next morning, Sienna's lawyer called Patricia to accept my settlement offer. By noon, the divorce papers were signed. By evening, Sienna had moved out of our house and into a small apartment across town. I never saw her again. 6 months later, I received a wedding invitation in the mail. Sienna had married a real estate developer from Phoenix. Apparently, her talent for finding and seducing wealthy men hadn't diminished. I threw the invitation away without reading it completely, but not before noticing that she'd kept my last name. Some habits, apparently, are harder to break than others. Damian Cross sold his company and moved to Seattle, where he started over as a mid-level marketing consultant. His ex-wife got the house, the cars, and custody of their daughters. The last I heard, he was living in a studio apartment and driving a used Honda. As for me, I threw myself into expanding Callahan Technologies. Within 2 years, we doubled our revenue and opened offices in 3 new cities. I bought a larger house, started dating again, and discovered that life after betrayal could actually be better than life during deception. The only reminder of my marriage to Sienna was a framed photo I kept in my office drawer. Not of our wedding or any happy moment we'd shared, but a screenshot of her text message to Damien. Half of everything is mine, right? It served as a useful reminder that trust, once broken, can never be fully repaired. But it also reminded me that I was capable of protecting what was mine, no matter how clever or ruthless my opponents might be. In the end, Sienna had been right about one thing. Half of everything had been hers, but she'd forgotten that the other half was mine, and I'd proven to be much better at keeping what belonged to me than she'd been at taking it away.